On a quiet afternoon in Blackstone, Massachusetts, everything seemed calm, until an innocent discovery turned into a nightmare. A 10-year-old boy, just on his way home, stumbled upon a sound that would forever change his life. A crying baby, abandoned and alone. The boy, confused and frightened, rushed to his mother, Betsy Brown, urging her to help. She followed him to the house, never suspecting the horrors that awaited her inside. When she opened the door, the sight that greeted her was enough to leave her frozen in place, a scene so disturbing that it would haunt the entire town for years to come. But this was just the beginning. The house, once filled with the typical sounds of a family's home, had been transformed into a prison of unimaginable neglect and suffering. The walls told a story no one was prepared to hear. And the child, the one whose cries had led Betsy to the doorstep, was only the beginning of a much darker reality. What Betsy uncovered that day would shock the entire community, and the investigation that followed would reveal secrets that no one could have predicted. But the truth, buried in a sea of lies, would soon come to light, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. What drove someone to commit such unspeakable acts? And could anyone have known the truth before it was too late? Stay with us as we unfold a case that defied belief and left an entire town shaken to its core. In the small, seemingly peaceful town of Blackstone, Massachusetts, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. Nestled just 20 miles from Worcester, the town appeared to be an idyllic place where neighbors greeted each other with friendly smiles and children played outside until dusk. The streets were lined with cozy homes, their white picket fences framing the picture of suburban tranquility. This was a place where nothing out of the ordinary ever seemed to happen, a place where people could rest easy, secure in the idea that safety was guaranteed. But on that quiet afternoon, the calm facade of Blackstone would be shattered forever. At the center of this story is Erica Murray, a mother of 3 who lived in a modest home on a quiet street. To the outside world, Erica appeared to be like any other parent, her life seemingly filled with the normal ups and downs of raising children. But behind the walls of her home, things were far different. Her relationship with her children, her living conditions, and her choices, many of which would later be uncovered during the investigation, painted a picture of neglect and abuse that no one could have anticipated. Erica's children, 3 young lives, lived in a house that had become a silent witness to unimaginable suffering. The eldest, a teenage girl, and 2 younger boys, one of whom was still a toddler, had learned to exist in a world that seemed to be governed by fear and silence. These children, isolated and vulnerable, were living in an environment that lacked love, care, and protection. And then there was the neighbor, Betsy Brown. A kind-hearted woman, Betsy had known Erica for years. She had always been the friendly, helpful neighbor, someone who never hesitated to lend a hand when needed. But nothing could have prepared Betsy for the horrors she was about to face. When her 10-year-old son, Jack, made a disturbing discovery in Erica's home, she was thrust into a nightmare she could have never imagined. It started with Jack, a young boy whose curiosity led him into Erica's house on that fateful day. What he found inside, what he witnessed, would change everything. The sight of a crying baby, abandoned in a room filled with garbage and filth, was the first sign that something was horribly wrong. But when Betsy arrived, her worst fears were realized. She found more than just a neglected child. She found an entire family trapped in a web of horror. In the days that followed, as the investigation began to unfold, people in the town would start asking questions. How could something like this happen in a place like Blackstone? What was happening behind the closed doors of Erica's home? And who was responsible for the horrors that were about to come to light? As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, the answers would reveal a much darker truth than anyone could have imagined. And the town of Blackstone would forever be changed by the secrets it had been hiding for so long. One ordinary afternoon in the quiet town of Blackstone, Massachusetts, Jack, a 10-year-old boy, was playing outside when he heard something that would forever change his life. It wasn't the usual sounds of children laughing or birds chirping, but instead, the unmistakable sound of a baby crying, coming from the house next door. He stopped in his tracks, the cry cutting through the stillness of the day. It wasn't a normal cry, not the kind of whimpering that a baby might make when it's hungry or tired. This cry felt urgent, desperate, like a call for help. Jack knew something was wrong. Curiosity took hold of him, and he approached the house. What he would find inside was far more horrifying than he could have ever imagined. When Jack opened the door, the stench hit him immediately. It was overwhelming, sickening. A combination of rotting food, old trash, and the unmistakable smell of neglect filled the air. He hesitated, but the sound of the baby's cries pushed him forward, urging him to act. The house, which appeared to be just another home in the neighborhood, was anything but ordinary. Inside, chaos reigned. The living room was cluttered with garbage, old food containers, and broken furniture. Toys were scattered across the floor, abandoned, forgotten by the children who should have been playing with them. But it wasn't just the state of disarray that struck Jack. It was the silence that hung in the air. There was no one else in sight, no sign of an adult to calm the baby. The cries, desperate and weak, echoed through the house. Jack knew he couldn't leave the infant alone, and his mind raced with what he should do next. In that moment of panic, Jack ran back to his mother, Betsy Brown. She was just down the street, and when Jack explained what he had found, Betsy's heart sank. She immediately followed Jack to the house, unsure of what she was about to encounter, but knowing it couldn't be good. She had known Erica Murray for years, an acquaintance, someone she occasionally chatted with when their paths crossed. But never had she imagined she would be walking into a nightmare. Betsy walked into the house, and what she saw left her in shock. The scene inside was more horrifying than anything she could have imagined. The stench of the house hit her like a wave, but it was the sight of the infant that shook her to her core. The baby, malnourished and weak, was lying in a crib surrounded by filth. The crib itself was a mess, with old stained blankets and sheets. There was no comfort, no warmth, just a cold, empty room filled with the echoes of a child's cry. The baby's skin was pale and its body frail, evidence of the neglect it had suffered in this suffocating home. But the baby was not the only victim. As Betsy looked around, she realized that the entire house was a prison of neglect. The children who lived there, the siblings of the crying baby, were nowhere to be seen. The house was dark, cold, and oppressive, with rooms full of broken furniture, piles of unwashed clothes, and food containers long forgotten. The air was thick with the smell of decay, both literal and figurative. This was not a home, it was a symbol of utter abandonment. Betsy immediately knew that she couldn't leave the child in this condition. She frantically called the authorities, urging them to come as quickly as possible. As she did, her thoughts raced. How could this happen? How could a mother, a person entrusted with the care of her children, allow this to happen? She thought of her own children at home, safe and loved, and couldn't fathom the suffering this innocent baby must have endured. As Betsy waited for the police to arrive, her mind couldn't shake the chilling reality of what she had found. Who had been responsible for this? How had it gone unnoticed for so long? And most importantly, what kind of person could do something so terrible to a child? The answers would soon come, but they would only lead to more questions. The truth was darker than anyone could have imagined, and the discovery inside that house was only the beginning. The discovery was just the beginning, and as the investigation unfolded, more details about the lives of the children and their mother, Erica Murray, would emerge. But at that moment, all Betsy could think about was getting the child the help it desperately needed, and getting answers to the questions that were quickly piling up. When the police arrived at the scene, they were met with an image far more chilling than anyone could have expected. What was originally believed to be a case of child neglect had escalated into something much darker, something none of them had prepared for. The house that had appeared ordinary from the outside, a simple suburban home tucked away in Blackstone, Massachusetts, was now revealed to be a house of horrors. As the officers stepped through the front door, the overwhelming stench of decay and filth immediately struck them. The house, once filled with life, now felt abandoned, suffocating. But it was what they found inside that would leave them speechless. And the investigation took on a new, horrific dimension. The baby lying abandoned in the crib was only the beginning. Upon further inspection, police discovered that there were other children hidden within the confines of this house. Locked in rooms with little more than scraps of food to survive on, these children had lived a nightmare that most people could scarcely imagine. The conditions were unbearable, rooms with no light, no warmth, no comfort. The air was thick with the sense of neglect, as if these children had been forgotten by the world. But what was perhaps most horrifying were the signs of abuse and malnutrition that marred their tiny bodies. One child, a girl no older than 7, had visible bruises and cuts across her arms and legs. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken and hollow, a clear sign of the suffering she had endured. Another child, a boy who appeared to be around 5, was so emaciated that it was hard to believe he had ever been a healthy, normal child. His bones jutted out from beneath his skin, and his eyes had a vacant, distant look, as if he had given up on the world long ago. But perhaps the most chilling part of the discovery was the silence. The children didn't cry. They didn't beg for help. They simply sat in the corners of their rooms, too weak to do anything but wait. Wait for something, anything to change. They had lived in these conditions for far too long, and the trauma they had endured was evident in every step, every glance. As the police combed through the house, they uncovered more and more evidence of the horrors that had taken place inside those walls. Dirty clothes piled up in corners, food scraps left to rot on the floors, and toys, long forgotten, scattered throughout the rooms. It was as if the house had been frozen in time, a snapshot of a family that had fallen apart in the most tragic of ways. At first, there was no sign of Erica Murray. No one knew where she had gone. It wasn't until a neighbor mentioned seeing her leave the house in a hurry that authorities began to piece together what had happened. Erica was nowhere to be found, and her disappearance only deepened the mystery surrounding the case. The investigation had shifted from child neglect to something much darker. But what had driven a mother to commit such unspeakable acts against her own children? The authorities worked quickly to find Erica. Days passed and rumors swirled through the small town of Blackstone. Some speculated that she had abandoned her children to escape the mounting pressure of motherhood, while others whispered about a more sinister possibility. What had really been happening inside that house? What could have pushed a mother to her breaking point? Then the breakthrough came. A local tip led the police to a small apartment on the outskirts of town. It was there that they found Erica, alone and disoriented, as if she had been living in a daze for days. She was arrested and taken into custody, but the questions that lingered remained unanswered. How could someone capable of such cruelty be the same person who gave birth to these innocent children? As the investigation continued, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It wasn't just a case of a mother failing to care for her children. There was a deeper, more twisted story at play. The evidence began to suggest that Erica had been living in a state of severe psychological distress, and perhaps even psychosis. Could her actions be the result of something far more complex than simple neglect? Was she a victim of her own mental health struggles, or was she something darker, a person capable of unimaginable cruelty? As the days wore on and the investigation deepened, the town of Blackstone was left grappling with the truth. It was clear that something had gone horribly wrong in Erica Murray's life. But the question remained, what had pushed a mother to commit such atrocities? The search for answers had only just begun, and with each passing day, the mystery surrounding the case grew darker. The truth was out there, but it would take time to unravel the full story of Erica Murray, the children she left behind, and the shocking events that led to the discovery of a nightmare inside an ordinary home. As the investigation continued, the truth, once hidden behind the walls of Erica Murray's home, began to surface. What was initially thought to be a simple case of neglect and abandonment had morphed into something far more disturbing. Behind the seemingly ordinary facade of a mother and her children, the darkest of secrets had festered for years. The authorities soon uncovered the full extent of the abuse. The children, some of whom were barely able to speak or walk, had been subjected to unimaginable neglect. What the officers discovered was not just a dirty house, it was the physical manifestation of a mother's brokenness, a reflection of years of unaddressed pain, suffering, and chaos. The home itself, riddled with garbage, rotting food, and dust, stood as a silent witness to the years of trauma the children had endured within its walls. The truth was far worse than anyone could have imagined. These children, once full of potential, full of life, had been trapped in a cycle of isolation and starvation. Malnourished to the point of emaciation, their bodies had begun to betray them, each one too frail to even fight for themselves. One of the children, a girl named Rachel, was found with broken ribs, her body bearing the bruises of years of mistreatment. Another, a boy named Jason, was unable to stand without assistance, his tiny limbs weak and swollen from years of inadequate nutrition. But perhaps the most heartbreaking discovery was the emotional toll this cruelty had taken on these children. They had been kept locked in rooms, isolated from the outside world. They had never known love, comfort, or safety. Instead, they had learned to survive in silence, their voices hushed by fear, their hearts hardened by neglect. The authorities quickly realized that this was not just a case of physical abuse, it was psychological warfare, a long-term torture that had stripped these children of their innocence. They had been denied basic human needs, love, care, and even a sense of normalcy. They had never been allowed to play, to laugh, or to experience the simple joys of childhood. They had been reduced to mere shadows of who they were meant to be. As the truth of the abuse came to light, the emotional weight of the situation became almost unbearable. The children, now removed from the home and placed into care, began to show signs of the deep trauma they had endured. They could not speak, they could not trust, and they could not connect. They had been broken, but the process of healing would be long and painful. Medical professionals, child psychologists, and social workers were brought in to assist with the recovery process. They worked tirelessly to help these children reclaim their humanity. Slowly but surely, the children began to open up, though the scars of their past would never truly disappear. Their once innocent faces were now etched with fear, pain, and confusion. Some of them clung to their new caregivers as if they feared being abandoned again, while others withdrew into themselves, unwilling to engage with the world around them. The emotional toll of their rescue was evident. In the days following their removal from the home, the children exhibited signs of severe trauma, nightmares, emotional outbursts, and an inability to trust those around them. For years, they had been forced to fend for themselves, to live in a constant state of fear and uncertainty. Now, in the safety of foster care, they were faced with the overwhelming task of relearning how to be children. The impact on the children was immediate, but the real question lingered. How could a mother do this? How could Erica Murray, a woman who was once a mother to these children, allow this kind of abuse to persist for so long? The answers would come slowly, as investigators continued to dig deeper into Erica's life. As the investigation progressed, it was revealed that Erica had been struggling with her own demons for years. A history of mental health issues, coupled with a difficult and abusive upbringing, seemed to have pushed her to the edge. Yet, even as these revelations came to light, they did little to excuse the unimaginable pain she had caused her children. Erica was charged with multiple counts of child abuse and neglect, and the case quickly became a source of both anger and sorrow within the community. How could such a thing happen in their quiet town? How could a mother be capable of such cruelty? These questions, though valid, offered little comfort to the children who would carry the weight of this tragedy with them for the rest of their lives. The town of Blackstone, forever changed by the events of that fateful day, would never be the same. The discovery of the abuse in Erica Murray's home had torn the fabric of this seemingly peaceful community, leaving behind only a sense of shock and disbelief. But for the children, the real journey was just beginning. They would need years of therapy, years of healing, and years of love to undo the damage that had been done. And even then, they would never truly be the same. But with time, and with the help of those who cared for them, they would learn to trust again. They would learn to smile again. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would find a way to heal their broken hearts. For Erica Murray, however, there would be no healing. The damage she had done was irreversible, and she would have to live with the consequences of her actions for the rest of her life. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the scars of her children, now in the light, would never be forgotten. The revelation of Erica Murray's horrific actions had shaken the foundations of Blackstone, Massachusetts. What was once a tight-knit, peaceful town had been forever altered by the dark secrets uncovered in her home. The crime, which had first appeared as a quiet, unfortunate case of neglect, had spiraled into one of the most disturbing child abuse scandals the community had ever witnessed. Now the aftermath loomed, filled with legal battles, community grief, and an indelible scar that no one could erase. In the weeks following the rescue of the children, the town's collective breath was held as Erica Murray, the woman who had once been seen as just another mother in their midst, stood accused of unthinkable crimes. Her arrest came swiftly as the police gathered the evidence that painted a chilling portrait of a mother gone rogue. The arrest itself was swift, though the emotional weight of it all lingered in the air, as neighbors and friends who had once known Erica now struggled to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the monster she had become. Erica Murray faced multiple charges, including severe child abuse, child neglect, and the endangerment of her children's lives. The prosecution's case was damning. Photographs of the conditions in her home, medical reports that detailed the extent of the children's malnutrition and physical abuse, and the testimonies of neighbors and social workers who had visited her home in the past, all contributed to the evidence against her. The trial was a painful experience for the community. Many of the townspeople attended the court hearings, hoping for answers to the questions that haunted them since that day of discovery. How had they missed the signs? How could this happen in their town? And perhaps most poignantly, what had driven a mother to inflict such suffering on her own children? Courtroom footage captured Erica's stoic expression as she sat at the defendant's table, her eyes empty as the prosecutor presented case after case of abuse. She showed no emotion as the horrors of her actions were revealed in painful detail. Her defense, though it offered explanations for her behavior, could not absolve her of the immense cruelty she had inflicted on her own flesh and blood. Her mental health struggles, her own tumultuous upbringing, all of these factors played a role in her unraveling. But none of them could explain the extent to which she had abandoned her responsibility as a mother. As the trial progressed, the full weight of Erica's crimes became clear. The children, once found weak and fragile, were now slowly rebuilding their lives. But for them, the road to recovery would never be easy. The emotional scars would take years to heal. Therapy, counseling, and a lifetime of support from a new family would be their only hope for moving forward. The verdict, when it came, was swift, guilty on all counts. Erica Murray was sentenced to a lengthy prison term where she would serve time for the abuse and neglect of her children. But as the gavel came down, marking the end of the trial, it was clear that justice would never undo the damage she had caused. Her children would carry the weight of those years of torment with them for the rest of their lives. They would grow up in a world forever shaped by the shadows of their past. While Erica's fate was sealed behind prison bars, the emotional aftermath of this case left its mark on the town of Blackstone. The community, once proud of its quiet suburban life, was left reeling. No one in Blackstone had ever imagined that something so horrific could unfold in their midst. Yet, as the investigation unfolded and the truth was revealed, the town grappled with the realization that such darkness could live right next door. The streets, once filled with the sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting, now felt eerily quiet. The community held memorials for the children, trying to heal together, but the shadow of the crime remained. Friends and family of Erica Murray struggled to make sense of her actions, while others who had never known her kept their distance, unable to forget the disturbing image of the abandoned children and the horror that had unfolded behind the walls of her home. The town's schools, which had been a refuge for the children once they were removed from Erica's care, provided counseling services to help the community process what had happened. Parents whispered to one another, reminding their children of the importance of trust and vigilance. In the years that followed, Blackstone would slowly rebuild, but the scars of this tragedy would never completely fade. For those who had known Erica and her family, the question of why would linger, an unanswered cry in the wind. As for the children, their journey toward healing had just begun. The trauma they had endured was not something that could be easily overcome. They would grow up with the knowledge that the woman who should have protected them had been the one to harm them most. But in the months and years to come, they would find new families, new love, and new chances at life. And though they could never forget what they had been through, they would, with time, begin to rebuild the pieces of their shattered lives. The case of Erica Murray stands as a chilling reminder that darkness can exist in the most unsuspecting places. It is a warning that sometimes the things that happen behind closed doors are far worse than anything we could ever imagine. And while justice has been served for the children, the town of Blackstone will forever bear the emotional toll of this tragedy. The echoes of what happened will linger in the air, and the faces of those innocent children will haunt the memories of a community that was forced to reckon with the unimaginable. What if you could go back in time and somehow change the course of events? Would you have noticed the signs earlier, seen through the facade, and prevented the unimaginable from happening? This case, as shocking and devastating as it was, leaves us questioning how easily darkness can remain hidden right under our noses. The question we now ask is, could we have done more? Could someone have seen the red flags, heard the cries, and acted before it was too late? We want to hear from you. But behind the walls of her home, things were far different. Her relationship with her children, could the authorities or even the neighbors have noticed the warning signs of abuse sooner? What do you think about Erica Murray's story, and how could things have been different for her children? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We're eager to hear your opinions on this heartbreaking case. And if this story left you with chills, if the weight of it lingered in your mind long after the video ended, don't forget to subscribe. We dive into cases just like this one, each more disturbing and puzzling than the last. We explore the darkness that hides within the ordinary, the things most people would never imagine could be true. By subscribing, you'll never miss a chilling tale of true crime, and together we can continue to unravel these mysteries and give a voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves. But that's not all. The story doesn't end here. In our next video, we will delve into another shocking case that will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice and the human mind. You won't want to miss it. Stay tuned because we're just scratching the surface.